Call this meeting to order. It's a retreat of the Board of Education. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up, can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Ms. Tatum, is there a second? Ms. Rabin. Dr. Francis.
I move to amend the agenda to make the agenda planning an action item, so we can discuss our calendar.
I'll second that. Any discussion? I'm sorry.
So the email I had sent out about needing to vote for our 10-6 meeting, the time and the location for the retreat, we need to make that official as a vote. And so the suggestion was to just do that in agenda planning, but it has to be an action, so make it an action.
Otherwise, it's got to be a special meeting. All right. So, all those in favor? Ms. Olson on phone, aye. Passes 8-0. Thank you very much. All right. As amended? Yep, can we vote on the agenda as amended? So, all those in favor of voting on the agenda as amended? Ms. Olson? Aye. All right. Passes 8-0. Thank you very much. I know it's not on the agenda, but before I lose this letter, I just wanted to congratulate Miss O'Neill, who is now a CABE certified Board of Education member. I got a copy of all the letters. Congratulations. She's taken more training than is, well, anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate your keeping us straight. Exactly. 4 more years? No? All right. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our discussion items. The first item on the agenda is the Curriculum Institute update. So, Irene, if you want to maybe join us at the table, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones.
And I might just kick it off for us. First of all, when we posted this, I did get quite a few questions from board members. First of all, in reference to the actual format, we understand that the board wants to use that standard format. We did not apply it on this report, thinking that there were sections that would have been left blank. But we will make sure that going forward we utilize the format that the board has approved. The other comment I would make is that I hope you had a chance to see the Q&A that we did send out. I think we answered a lot of those questions. There were over 20 or 30 questions that really talk about what that summer work looked like, how much was spent. We asked some excellent questions, and thanks to Irene Creasy and Carol and their team for answering those so quickly. So if you have any questions for us, we'll have Ms. Creasy come forward if you have questions we haven't answered.
On that point, if there's Q&A that's a supplemental.
Can we use the microphone? It's right there. Thank you.
If there's a Q&A that's supplemental, at the same time it's sent to the board, can we make sure it's posted to board docs? Because I will tell you this afternoon that Q&A is not posted on board docs.
Sure.
That would be great if we could figure out how to do that.
Do you want to, I don't know, Ms. Creasy, do you have anything you want to add to Dr. Jones, or do you want to jump into discussion?
I think to jump into discussion, if there are any questions.
All right, Dr. Francis.
So one of the things I was asking when I wanted to sort of see it is I was hoping we could sort of see it in action. So kind of see what it is we have now as a comparison to sort of, I know we got this like 100-page document, and as far as I could tell, it was maybe 3 different courses, but just to kind of, to visually get a sense of that comparison of where we are now and how we would like to see that improved and what we imagine that's going to look like sort of in the next phase.
And is that question in reference to item B, the curriculum plan and review cycle, or is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the updating of the curriculum maps, basically, and my understanding was bringing in the written curriculum was sort of the next stage, and I wasn't sure how that was going to work with the, my understanding is that we have these curriculum maps, which are like the sections, and then there's some places where you can go in and you can have like connections to options that are electronic, and how is all of this going to piece together, like to get more of a visual of that.
I'm going to have to ask Ms. Parisi if she understands that question. I'm not quite understanding.
take these in order, or are we gonna jump around, or what are we gonna get?
Both of the same.
Well, that's why I'm just a little lost here. There's 2 items, same document.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out which conversation to have in which order. I don't want to go out of order. And the second thing was, are we going to work from the document top to bottom, or how are we going to do this?
I think, given it's a retreat, we can go a little more free flowing. A lot of
Oh, fine.
you can look at the Q&A if there's something that jumps out at you there. And I guess given that we have one document, I think it's fair to group both topics in the discussion. See, look, we cut an agenda item already.
No.
Say that again.
Understand, but if you can repeat.
So this is not about the review cycle. This is about the curriculum map. And there was the section that was commenting about sort of the new phase is going to be bringing in written curriculum as sort of the next stage, which is why I had asked, what my question was asking, can we see today online, like play with this is what our curriculum map looks like now, this is what's available now in terms of, I know a lot of them, I think there's links to different online tools that can be used, and now it sounds like there's going to be addition of another step, and so I was just thinking it would be easier if we could have a visual of what that is and actually see it in action.
Well, there's like a little paragraph.
Yes.
No, there is, you're right, but
It's not
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I think I understand. Like I said here, that the intent of the digitally matched curriculum through Aspen, that was that plan that we set out in 2013 so that we had a documented written curriculum, our promise to all of our learners in the district. What we have found in the 5 years of implementation that Aspen, as the warehouse of the curriculum maps, presents many challenges and barriers to our teacher colleagues and admin colleagues. It's a software issue. The curriculum is still housed in Aspen, but based on teacher feedback and working with the teacher teams, we developed a new template, which is housed in Schoology. So this explains a year 1 phase where we decided to try the new templates. The curriculum map components are still the same. So like we talked about before, of essential questions, enduring understandings, concept skills, assessments, and then all the hyperlinks. It just migrated, like we moved it from an Aspen map, which is, I do have a blank example of what that format looks like, and we moved it over into this new template, which increases access, which provides one single document, and actually we layered in, which is something that the board has asked for, and we've wanted it as well, is what are the tiered supports for staff and students? So what are the adaptations? What are the opportunities for enrichment? So the components are still the same of research-based curriculum maps. Because we want to make sure that teachers have that ease of access and use. And Schoology is still our learning management system, and that's where we decided to try the new template for grade 2 and grade 9.
So none of it has yet gone into Schoology?
Only for grade 2 and grade 9.
So some of it is in there now?
Yep, just
Okay.
for those 2. I mean, we do have all of our resources for the curriculum in the district curriculum and assessment group for teachers to access. That's always been part of our practice when we were implementing the digital learning environment, so that we had, as we said, a portfolio of resources for teachers. So supplemental or companion resources are housed there, have been since the beginning. Again, there was a significant amount of teacher feedback as to access to the Aspen maps. Aspen, to get to something, and Peter, sure you'll relate to this, when it's more than one click to get there, then that can be problematic. So it's essentially 7 clicks to find the map, and that, again, was presenting a challenge. So again, this is in service of the teachers and the students.
Ms. Dayton?
Are there similar limitations in Schoology? Do we need to look for a new learning management system, or are we going to? No, I'm just questioning. I'm not suggesting or proposing it. I'm asking, given what you know today, will there be any dramatic problems with Schoology as the new place to house it?
No, and we did provide an update to the teachers when we came back with convocation and professional learning, and there were a lot of head nodding in all of the different updates, and they were pleased to see, oh my goodness, this makes it so much easier. And we did in the appendix provide you with what the new template looks like. So they were very pleased that we heard what they were saying and they're testing it out. But no, Schoology is still our learning management system and still very user-friendly. The user experience is very strong, so.
Mr.
So are we getting rid of that aspect of Aspen and therefore saving?
It's gonna take,
We're getting rid of that aspect of Aspen and therefore saving
as
money.
you know, when you transition from one system to another, you gotta run in parallel. So all of our there's over 367 courses documented in there, so we wanna do this the right way. And we have to use this year to find out if that's why we only did grade 2 and grade 9, see if it actually makes sense for teachers and get more feedback as we continue our implementation. But Aspen operates as modules, so this curriculum assessment module could be something that we would no longer use if we were to migrate everything over.
Ms. Rapin?
Then to follow on Kathleen's question, would it cost us more to be 100% in Schoology?
It's the same.
You can't.
It's the same. Because all of the services within Schoology is provided in that one fee, but in Aspen it is an additional fee for the curriculum module.
But that's your question.
So it'd be less.
Yeah.
You say savings.
Yeah,
So
it's-
you know, it's offset in Aspen. we're
She should
gonna-
get off of Aspen and drop the module from the contract.
Correct.
My question was, would Schoology cost more? And that was no.
No.
Oh,
It's a comprehensive, it's the enterprise version, so we have access to all of the resources.
So I wanted to ask about curriculum access for parents. I've been on the link that's provided in the Q&A. I can find it on the district website. That's not curriculum. So what is our plan to actually make the curriculum available to parents? Because this has been a question that's been repeatedly asked for years and years and years, and I'm hoping we have an answer for this one.
Well, we want to do it through Schoology for parents, because Aspen, again, is a software problem. There was a promise, and we were supposed to be able to open up the parent portal for curriculum through Aspen, and that's just not possible. So we want to do that through Schoology for parents.
So what's the time frame for that?
We're working on that, the part of the transition, and it's a lift on myself and the team, so we're hoping that it will be within this school year.
So for all of the content, or I guess you should say 2nd and 9 are there. So at the end of this year, will 2nd and 9th grade curriculum be available for parents?
Let me go back to the work plan, and I can provide that as a follow-up, but it would be more than grade 2 and grade 9, because we've heard it as well, and we want to be able to provide more. And I'm working closely with the PTAC presidents so that we can provide parents with more of the resources so that they can help their child at home.
Yep. No,
I have a bunch.
that'll do it all. Go ahead. Mr. Sherwood.
Are you on curriculum?
Yeah, but different topic.
Go ahead.
Ms. Dayton.
I'm on the curriculum management plan. I looked back at the previous version of it, and I just have a question. And I want to acknowledge that there may be new budgetary constraints that have caused some of the changes, and that was our responsibility. We voted to slow some of this development. However, in the last version, we had 1 year of implementation, not 3 years, before analysis of the curriculum. This is quite a dramatic stretching of the time frame. And the reason I'm sad about that is that science, we have to wait till 2025, and I consider that one of our top priorities. So, can you explain why a 3-year period for implementation of the new courses is needed before analysis?
Just using a research-based model of, taking 3 years to really understand data and the testing, using the summative assessment to inform as well. What runs behind this is still that we're always going to be analyzing it year over year, and how did that go for the teachers, have a feedback loop. And I think we have to allow for opportunities for some renewal that's going to kind of be off cycle, and that's what, again, you're making a prediction out to 2026, and in working with Dr. Jones and her vision for this, there are a couple of things that you pointed out. We want to have the equitable division of the expenditures for sure, and making that promise and that focus for on K-12 in a comprehensive way. But I do think that there will be an opportunity to get feedback. We may have to have some change and renewal in these off years. And I think we have to allow for some of that room, that if we come back and say something's going to be off cycle, then we have to have that discussion and then see how that works. But I think Dr. Jones can speak more to the vision for this.
Dr. Jones.
Thank you. This is actually in response to something that I asked Ms. Parisi to work on with her team, and I'm appreciative that they did. One of the concerns that I had in looking at when you go back to the 2015 and you start looking at that 5-year cycle, if you're going to have 4 major content areas in the same year, it becomes incredibly difficult in a budget that is staying very tight in curriculum. Because if we're going to continue to see salaries rise, which I think in Fairfield County, we know that's the case, if in fact the economics is going to keep budget increases around that 2% area, which I think most people think that's where we're going to be, then you're continually cutting from somewhere in the budget in order to balance that. And so what we want to do is make sure that if we bring teachers to the table to write curriculum, that we can find all of the resources that they need for that curricular area. So it is a little bit of a different approach, but it's very much tied to the budget and making sure we can fund the full process.
Ms. Raven.
So maybe, all right, it's a different one. So maybe it's just, to Jennifer's point, maybe science might come up before phys ed and art type thing. If you thought that one curriculum area was a higher priority than another and still wanted that spacing. I just need to be reminded in the alignment, development, and then BOE part, what actually happens with the BOE. I went to the prior page and I was looking under all those bullets, and I just need a reminder of where the BOE comes in those boxes.
I might add that was an outgrowth of listening to all of you as I had individual meetings, is that when is curriculum coming to the board, at what point, and we know that it's very systematic, and that's something that the board had conveyed. They didn't feel like, I mean, we weren't doing it, but it didn't feel like we were doing that. So very intentionally, when you even look at how the colors line up, it's very easy for somebody to read this curriculum map and know when we're coming to the board by looking at where that dark color is.
So that's when we'll get a review or a synopsis of it.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you. Ms. Parisi used the word renewal. So when does a renewal pass into something that ought to come to the board? Because we've had this practice of doing these renewals at the, over the summer and basically running with it at the beginning of the school year. There's no board interaction at that point.
So if I may, with renewal, the goal has always been a learner-centered approach to the curriculum and being responsive to innovation or the needs of the learners. So renewal isn't a redesign or a redevelopment. That's what you see now in this cycle. The renewal is if a new digital tool was released, and I'm just using this as an example, and teachers are really responding to it, they really want it. So part of that analysis and that feedback, nothing substantially is changing about the curriculum, but now we can layer in another resource, and that's where what we call renewal.
So, Mr. Chair.
Peter, I think this has come up before and we've just never run it to ground. The board needs its own independent advice on what is our obligation under the statute to approve curriculum. We keep going through this thing of as interpreted by, and we've just kind of accepted it. I mean, somehow we've gotten ourselves reduced into the point where, I want to say the number of years I've looked at the board, the approval is we looked at a textbook when they picked a new one. And we've probably done that 3 times in the years I've been on the board. To me, I'm guessing that's probably too narrow a interpretation of our obligation under the law. So I think we should probably start with what is the board's responsibility, and then we could probably have a discussion as a board on what level do we want to get involved, or what level do we not want to get involved. I wouldn't want to get over involved, but I am worried that we're under involved. And I'd like to get some advice and on that to the board. We got to get some outside counsel to that. Anyway, you want me to go to my other question? I'm sorry. Did you want
I
to
think this
do
one
that?
on this, and then we'll come back in. Ms. O'Neill?
It's very clear in the statute that the board is not only supposed to appoint the curriculum committee, but also approve curriculum. So my question is, what is the criteria that you use that tells you this is a point in time when we need to bring this to the board? What criteria do you use to say, okay, this curriculum has to come to the board?
It's that, I think if new standards came out and we have to go into a redesign, if national standards were released, then that warrants a whole redesign and redevelopment. We would go through that process, and before that curriculum went into practice and went live, that's when it would come to the board. And I believe Dr. Jones' vision is to have that curriculum come to the board maybe in the spring for approval, review and approval, or however you want to interpret the statute, before it actually goes live for teachers and implemented in the classroom.
So why didn't the ALP science curriculum come to the board? I asked for and received, thank you, the copy of the science curriculum for ALP. It's not the ALP curriculum that was there. It is completely been absorbed. And that's a change, a major change. That seems to me, well, it's not a standalone. It's a push-in using standard regular classroom curriculum. And this is a process question.
Who made that decision?
Well, that's my point. My point is that should have come to the board. Parents are upset over it, teachers are upset over it, and so a process was obviously not followed in coming to the board.
So the transition plan to the NGSS science, those were standards, and the conceptual framework and the approach, that has been, I think some of it predates me, and Sheila Savala had been leading that work. And once the standards were approved by the State Board of Ed, we did bring those standards to the board, and by approving those objectives, we then did write the curriculum. Because there's no parallel curriculum right now, no one in the state, there's no one nationwide that can actually answer what does advanced science, just calling it that advanced science, look like through the NGSS standards. Because the NGSS standards are so incredibly rigorous in what the expectations are for students. We needed a year of implementation side by side as partners, the advanced learning teachers.
Let's stick to the process, because I don't agree with what you said, but let's stick to the process. The process was, if there was that major change, that should have come to the board.
Okay.
That whole program has been totally altered, almost obliterated. So that's wrong. That's not keeping with any policy. And you're very good at policy because you quote it all the time in your reports. So that's very disturbing to me. The other question,
Before we move off that. When we get to agenda plan, I don't know if anybody else feels like that. I want a discussion on that item. I mean, I don't know how that happened, I don't know who did it, doesn't matter. But to take that and make that kind of decision without the board's engagement, that, you're new, so you get a hall pass.
What's the second year of it?
Yeah.
I did, by the way, if it was wrong and we need to undo it, then we just need to undo it.
Yeah, but so.
But it doesn't matter to me what happened, it matters, I mean, it does matter, but I don't want to dwell on how we got here. I think the point of it, I'd like to see it as an item for discussion of if this was the right decision or the wrong decision, and the board ought to have a point of view on that. If it winds up unwinding something, it winds up unwinding something. We're here for the kids and educating the kids. It doesn't matter what the adults did.
Dr. Jones?
Yeah, I do just want to remind the board, that's why you're seeing a different plan tonight, that we are making a good faith effort to say, we want a really tight cycle when the board knows that the curriculum is going to come to you, that we are going to bring a sample of, what that unit looks like. I would hope we would have teachers here who are going to actually be teaching that curriculum, that can explain to you, why we have made changes that we have, because we're a 21st century school district. And I just want to remind it, because it's really easy to look back and we can have a conversation about all the things that didn't go well, but I'm really trying to look forward. We have a group of people, and even on the Q&A that I sent yesterday, I said, this really was a draft to get feedback tonight that we're on the right track. We know where we've been is not exactly where the board wants to be.
So if I could just follow up on something. You mentioned the NGSS science standards. So maybe you can explain to us where we are in the implementation of the standards, because what you said is you came to the board with objectives, you built the curriculum. That's not come back to us, and we are obviously using a science curriculum based on the NGSS. So tell me where we are, where we're going.
Right. I'd have to respectfully say that we did provide we gave full units of the NGSS curriculum with a K-8 scope and sequence to the board through the STEM monitoring report. And I can more than happy to go back and bring
But we've
that.
had this discussion before. When we accept a report, we are saying we have received the report, not that we accept what's in it if you're recommending a change. If you didn't call out that we were accepting curriculum, which it wasn't, I can go back to the report, we haven't accepted that curriculum. Ms. Dayton.
Just as a systematic way to ensure board oversight on this curriculum plan, I'd like to see at max 2 years of implementation before the next step in the cycle, so that we more often, I won't be on the board, but the board will have more frequent opportunities to provide oversight on curricular changes in all of these disciplines.
Dr. Francis.
So, one response and then a different question. One of the questions was gonna be, we have this sort of every maybe 5-year cycle, but it seems like there's times when things come up when something might need to be changed in between, and so clearly that's gonna have to be reflected. So if something like this were to happen in social studies, that the state now decides their standards and it's not when we were expecting it, but a change is gonna happen, then obviously the board needs to be apprised of those changes at the time, even if it's not set in this cycle. Then going back, I think, to more your original question, Jennifer, in terms of this, one of the reasons I had wanted to look back at the prior 5-year cycle was to get a sense of, why is it that we're sort of everybody's starting from scratch here, and how does it align? So I was wondering how was decided the priority of who was going to get sort of alignment and presentation to the Board of Ed, and is that something that we as a board should be reflecting on as well?
There's a whole part of that chart that's to the left that we got before that's just been cut off because of timing. This is on the normal cycle.
No, but I'm not sure, looking at the old one, that I haven't studied it carefully because I didn't get till this afternoon, but that, for example, social studies was the one that was done longest ago, and that science, was the most recent. So, how did you guys determine that this was the appropriate pace? And I'm trying to, I had it for a second split with the two next to each other so I could try and compare, and I just haven't fully evaluated that, but I was hoping I could.
The charts read differently, so in working with previous folks from the board, Adriana Ospina, we tried a different approach where that previous chart from 2015 to 2020 read on a diagonal, so you could see how the work was flowing in each phase. And I have shared with you before that when I arrived here, in many areas we had no curriculum. So there was a sense of urgency and an obligation to make sure. So yes, we were working in multiple areas at once. And as time went on through that plan, we lost coordinators and then we gained coordinators. So through their expertise and knowledge, things were always changing. So where we are now in considering the timing of it, the science is the most recent and brand new, so that's why you'll see in 21, 22, it says implement after 3 years, so again, we have a full solid implementation of 3 years. There's the analysis as well, kind of like a mid-course correction opportunity to see where are we, how's that working for us. So that could be something that ends up being off cycle. The other thing to realize is we're trying to provide a year in between of the K-12 coordinators' work so they can focus. So if you look up to mathematics and you cross, so Sheila Savall will be working on mathematics in that given year, providing an opportunity to really focus on the implementation of that, then that's why science comes like a gap, a cushion year, if you will, as they call it. The same applies for social studies and for ELA.
Dr. Johnson, do you want to add anything to that? Ms. O'Neill and then Ms. Field.
So when you're going through the analysis of the curriculum to decide whether or not it should be renewed or recycled or whatever. What is the data that you use? You look at student achievement, I hope, because that's what
Absolutely.
curriculum's all about. It's about helping, and our scores haven't had a great trajectory. So I'm wondering what data it is that you use to determine whether a curriculum needs minor shifts or a major overhaul, or are we just assuming that after 5 years, everything needs an overhaul?
So certainly the summative data, we also look at other internal measures and how students are progressing through the curriculum. The teacher feedback, after they implement a unit, they have been completing a unit reflection form, and so we use that data. So that helps us identify patterns and trends of a theme across a grade, where we recognized even in grade 1, our students were actually progressing further in the math progressions. And so based on a preponderance of evidence in grade 1 of their ability, we collapsed a unit 1 year, 2 units into one, because that was being responsive to the needs of the students. Additionally, we also look at research. We are refining rubrics that we would use to make sure that the curriculum is, as if you go into this particular document, kind of gives you some of the guiding questions that we would use and want to answer.
So when it comes time to renew some of these curriculums, you'll be sharing some of that data as to why you decided to do the whole curriculum, this particular aspect of it, and tie it to student achievement?
Absolutely, and we hope to use the academic reports to inform the board, as we've tried to use the monitoring reports. And you'll notice that we're coming to you earlier. So humanities is coming in October, and STEM will be coming in November, so that we can look back at our data and the most recent summative data to say, here's what we're acting on this year, so that we can inform you earlier of some of the action steps and strategies that we would like to implement.
Peter, can you jump in? Mr. Bernstein?
Yep, go ahead, and then we'll.
I just wanted to say, so I mean, to look back and to say that it is really hard to believe that Greenwich Public Schools in a lot of areas did not have curriculum. Like, that's alarming. So I feel like there must be something there, right? It sounds like you sort of helped make it more concrete. I just want to also echo what Barbara and Neil just said. I think it's really important to be looking at data because, recycling and renewing sometimes you end up reinventing the wheel with a new name. So I think it's really important to be focusing on the data, and that needs to continue to come to the board in a timely manner.
Peter, did you?
Yeah, I've got kind of two topics, but so let me deal with one and then I'll yield and then I'll come back to the other one. Irina, there's something I need to understand though first, because, and then I'm going to give you some input and feedback, is you take the standard, right, that come from the state of Connecticut, and that essentially says, here's what a student must know, how to do, or must know, right? That's essentially the way a standard is described, right?
In some ways, yeah, there's more to it, but yeah.
There's more to it, but it's more or less, in this grade, in this subject,
The
you
outcomes
must
should be
know,
communicated, absolutely.
right, right? And then you guys go develop a curriculum locally, or we buy one, to be able to meet those standards, let's say, right? And that's what the teacher uses to essentially get their pedagogy to educate the student, right? So I understand you guys laid out curriculum maps, which essentially said to meet all these standards for mathematics in grade 3, here's how you should progress through. And you laid that out, you chunked that out into units of study.
Yes.
The units of study are to be given in sequence? Do you let the teacher decide what sequence to give the units of study?
It's a collaborative conversation because each content area operates a little differently. Math is more linear, and there's a inherent progression in those standards. So we want to ensure that students are having that scaffold experience and building upon those
Right.
prerequisite
So,
skills.
but
ELA may operate slightly differently, and we talk with the teachers or the coaches, or they talk with their building principals or as a team, and they try to say that this could potentially work best for the students in that new progression. So we do try to allow for teacher input to say, Unit 2 should come before Unit 1. ELA operates a little differently. But we make every effort to make sure that the progression is understood and that the way we have designed the units supports the learning,
Mhm.
that scaffold experience, but also is in support of those grades that have that summative statewide assessment, so they have access to that content prior to the assessment.
Okay, well, that part's a given, right? So that's interesting, you don't necessarily make a recommended progression. Okay, in all subject areas. So anyway, once you do that, then you say, here's the progression, here's the units to study, here's a recommendation of what you're supposed to do. Oh, by the way, we gave you a bunch of curricular resources to support this. We said, start with, as an example, this unit in that textbook, right? But as an
Right,
example.
we've aligned the
And then
textbook to
you
those
say to
units.
them, oh, by the way, in Schoology, here's other resources
Mhm.
that we've given you that you could use. I think you listed them, I can give you a playlist, I could give you a variety of different things, and you talked about the thing of e-portfolios and all the rest of it, right?
Mhm.
So, an individual teacher in a classroom has to then do what? So you've essentially given them a map, it's aligned to standards, and you've given them some resources. But then the teacher goes and puts together their own independent lesson plan using those resources?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a
Which means
professional responsibility, yeah.
we've got like 900 teachers doing lesson plans, right?
So what we're working towards, this is why in the document you see the core, so you see the unit overview, the new one, and then the core learning plan.
Mhm.
So the intent is to have core learning plans that are essentially a model curriculum that provides the teachers with a model, like this is a research-based effective lesson, this is what the lesson should look like. Because we've heard that from teachers as well, there's so many resources to
The individual
work with.
lesson.
Correct. We're not going to write all of the teachers' lessons because I think that there's an art and science to it, and every teacher wants to write their lessons to the audience in front of them.
I was in a different place. I was in
But,
yeah, go ahead.
well, essentially, yes. I mean, that's part of what we do. It's our professional responsibility to take the curriculum and work with our team and the resources to develop that sequence of lessons for the learner, or those deep learning experiences.
Okay. It connects to another thing when I talk about personalized learning. I want to get to personalized learning but here's the thing that struck me when I saw this for the two of you and maybe for the others aboard. And this was actually a really helpful report. It was reasonably concise. You know, the 100 pages generally don't help, they confuse. So I appreciate that this thing was concise, actually, whether it followed format or what, I don't really care. I care about the content. But the thing that jumped out at me is I develop software for a living and have for years. And this whole methodology, maybe it jumped out because it was concise, is essentially where lots of people were who had to create knowledge, which is what this is, 10, 15 years ago. And they had all the same problems that you guys are articulating. Resource constraints, timing, change, all of these constraints. And I think it might be worth looking at some of those practices on how other people. So let me give you an example. This thing that's laid out here, it looks like a waterfall. Okay, that's actually what it's called in software development. Okay, it looks like a waterfall, and it's this idea of, gee, let me take in some input, let's roll it all up, let's do a giant renewal project, and then I'll spit out a release of software. And then I'll wait a number of years to see what people tell me about it, and then I'll roll it all up, and I'll go through a big development effort. And the consequence of that is that it's totally inflexible to change. And it's like sitting down and saying you're not going to eat for 10 days and then you're going to have a giant turkey dinner. And then you're going to not eat for 10 days and you're going to have a giant turkey dinner. It's hard for people to consume a turkey dinner all at once. You're better off breaking it up into pieces, because that's the way people can consume and incorporate information. So the thing that struck me is that we need, for curriculum development, and maybe just curriculum development and education never saw this before, we need to move from a waterfall to something that's much more agile. And there's a way to do that. There's agile little pieces and they come out as needed and what have you. And the consumer in this case is the teacher and the student. No offense to you guys, not the guys in the building who have to run the program. You know, we have to be able to introduce these things, but not on cycles that are 2 and 3 years long, particularly if there's a change. The other thing that struck me in this, particularly in lesson plans, you know, if you think about, nobody goes and spends 3 years making the $40 million movie and only putting it out in movie theaters anymore, right? They go and they develop 12 hours of television, put it on Netflix, and it comes out every year. So, and the only way they got to that was, they got to a much more agile development, but they also got there because they didn't do everything custom, one at a time content development. You turn into, as a coordinator, much more of a content curator, right? Taking these pieces, putting them together, finding them, using them, making them available to the teacher. What troubles me in this, Tony, is you're talking about, we run this summer institute. I read through this. It's great, the number of people who worked on it, but it's all individual people sitting around doing custom development instead of curating content that may exist somewhere else. As an example, I'll give you a really good example. The other thing that happens in software is there's a lot of free stuff there, and you reuse stuff and you fill in with the stuff that you can't get free. So a good example of this is Math in Focus, right? We bought that day. It's no longer aligned. It's falling out of alignment to the standard. It turns out over in New York, they're developing whole stuff that's available that's free. Okay, I don't know whether it's any good or not, but I know we're not spending time looking at it, and we're not spending time. We're focused on the next problem of, we'll wait till we get to the renewal cycle. We'll figure out, go look at math. We'll go through this whole thing, it just seems to me, and then I heard the other thing which bothered me a little bit, was research-based 3 years, and then you said equitable division of resources. I don't want equitable division of resources between curricular areas. I want more money, no offense, I want more money spent on core education than the ancillary subjects. I do not want to spend the same amount of money on ELA that we spend on health. I don't want to spend the same amount of money on, I'm a big fan of theater and music, no offense. So, but that to me is out of balance. So the thing that was bothering me with this is, I know everybody here is doing a lot of work. Don't take it as a criticism of your work. I thank you for everything you do every day. I think there's an opportunity here, if you want feedback about this, particularly this and this methodology. I think we're trying to optimize within a methodology that is inherently constrained. And that's only going to get us so far. I think you have to think about, how do I get to agile? How do I get to things more often? How do I get to content curation? As an example, lesson plans. There's only 2 things you would do in lesson plans. You'd have them all developed centrally, or you'd find out if everybody's out there developing them, like YouTube, you'd have them, all the teachers publishing them so everybody else can use them. To live in that middle space where the central group doesn't provide the lesson plan, and all the teachers have no way of sharing lesson plans, then we're in the worst, which we have 900 people developing individual lesson plans. That's kind of like crazy land. So the feedback I wanted to give is, I think there's an opportunity here, and particularly to your point, I'll end it on this, with resource constraint, we're not going to get more resources. So this probably has to be a game of, how do we look at methodologies that have been used very successfully by other people in other situations that are almost identical, and maybe change the way we're doing this so that we can get the place we need to be, which is right content, right time, with the teacher, with the student, at the point of delivery. Dr. Jones.
Yeah, I'll just respond to a couple of things, and I greatly respect what you're saying. I think what you're saying is very much what we're trying to do. You know, when I look at our previous cycle, it was like having a turkey dinner every year, every day. And I think that would be really hard in the kitchen to cook that every day. And I think what we're trying to do is take a renewal cycle where we are bringing that curriculum to the board so we feel confident that we're meeting state standards, national standards, we're getting that curriculum in place. And I think it goes exactly to what Ms. Parisi was saying on this implementation years. Those are our teachers that are out in their classrooms that are tweaking and enhancing and doing all of that work, and that's really where it should happen. You know, there are a lot of crowdsourced websites for lesson plan development. They've been around for well over a decade, but if you want your teachers to revolt, you go tell them, I want you to teach these 180 lesson plans and you all have to be teaching the same thing. And that part, I think we have to allow that creativity. And we may have 900 people doing 900 different things, but that's where that whole professional learning community comes in, because when they're collaborating, you know, and they're working together, their plans are really somewhat similar, but then they're also going to put their unique expertise as an educator professional on that. And I don't think we ever want that to go away, especially in a place like Wrench.
Jennifer?
I just wanted to point out very briefly that the entire social studies curriculum follows the model that Peter was just describing. It uses open source, it uses free resources, it uses the curation model. So we do have it in district, we just don't have it systematically in the district.
Ms. Parisi, I'll give you a chance to respond.
I do want to, just to define one of the processes that we do use. So Schoology has been a tremendous benefit. That is our knowledge management, and a lot of sharing does take place. So we do curate through there from our teacher colleagues, because they are the ones that are making the curriculum come to life. So we've done a lot, and that's why having the annual renewal in the Curriculum Institute and the Lesson Share, we can review all of those and take them through like a vetting process, and then they become part of our curriculum. So Schoology helps support that knowledge management and that curation. That is part of our process, our practice.
Ms. Stowe, Dr. Francis, and then we'll check on the phone.
Peter, you have such a fun job. Sort of summarizing all of this, not that I'm saying it's the end, but just the way I see it. I think everything's a balance, right? And life and everything. And I agree, I always want to move faster, but that's sort of us being probably too business focused, Peter. And then you recognize you have 9,034 students and 900 and some odd teachers. And I do like how each one of them has their own creativity, because you do need to have autonomy in your classroom. And I think about how I deliver something as opposed to how Gaetan delivers something, and you can't be anyone but yourself when you're in front of someone. And so I think that there's a lot, because that's what wins over a student. At the same time, obviously I want to make sure that a 7th grader at Central is learning the same thing as a 7th grader at Eastern and Western, so when they get to the high school, they make sure they had all their ducks in a row. So high level, wonderful. Can I come back to a very sort of myopic question now, which is going to Barbara's point on science, not to only pick on math and science tonight. One of the things that I have the advantage of is having children in the elementary schools, and I've been hearing from a lot of parents some frustration about the change in reading this year. Apparently there has been a reduction of an hour to 45 minutes in both Alben and the general ed classroom. And I don't know if you want to answer that tonight, but I would just like to understand, because there's a lot of frustration as to maybe it was a change in curriculum and that's why we're reducing it by 15 minutes.
It's actually a scheduling, a master schedule process. So what the elementary principals have tried to do, and what we've tried to provide them with, is of the comprehensive approach to providing that instruction across the school day. So I think what people are not really seeing is that there's still that full block of literacy and learning, but what we've tried to delineate is how much should be spent on the word study, that you don't want students to be in a workshop for hours on end, and not that they're in hours on end, but we're trying to find a balance of where's the word study taking place, where's the handwriting taking place, when is the independent reading the workshop approach happening, where students are independently reading and in the groups. So the block of time is still there. It's just we're trying to provide more guidance of how to use that instructional block intentionally.
Dr. Francis, then the phone, and then Mr. Shea.
So one of the things I just wanted to go back to, I think for a number of years now I've been suggesting that it would be good to have the system actually have sample lessons in there. And I think that was sort of the issue, is, curating, whether it's from our own teachers, whether it's from outside, broadening that net. But that's not the same as imposing on teachers that they have to do that particular thing. But I think particularly, you have a new teacher coming in, teachers going to a new grade, for them to have to create everything themselves doesn't make sense. So you go in, you say, oh, I love this one, or oh, I like that one, or this one suits me. to have those resources available, to have some of the materials that might help you reach that kid that's at a higher level or who maybe really needs to pick up on something they've struggled with. So I think to have those things available and in a way that's really user-friendly is very different in my mind than taking away the individuality of the teacher. And so I think all of us want us to find ways to maximize the availability of really strong supporting materials, that we're not spending oodles of time and money writing everything from scratch at some central office, but that we're using some of the availability of free materials, crowdsourcing within our schools, sharing best practices, doing those things, but still leaving teachers with their ability to personalize and to find ways that they feel are appropriate to share.
Ms. Olson, and then Mr. Sherry.
Yes, thank you. So I just was going to say, in similar vein, that teachers generally do like to notice share curriculum, the PLCs, the professional learning community, but again, we have 900 plus personalities, and I think for the teachers that aren't as willing to ask for help or ask for advice from others, to be able to go and have these resources, sample lesson plans there for them would make a big difference. Also, just looking at one of the lessons, have you, I guess this is for Irene, have you guys adopted the UDD curriculum now? I'm seeing that you're understanding and special questions. Is that something we're generally adopting?
Understanding by design has always been our framework for developing curriculum and working backward. That has not changed, and that has been written in policy that predates me. But that is,
right.
Yes, that's the research-based framework we utilize to write curriculum.
And then Ms. Earl.
Just as a side, I'd like anybody else interested, I'd like a demo of Schoology. Particularly, I want to see the knowledge.
Sure.
Knowledge management part of that.
Can we put it now?
No, I would not. I don't. I mean, you could, but I don't think we probably have time. I was suggesting we have it as the thing that I was trying to understand here, Irene, also is, and I had to go back and look at our definition of personalized learning. Anyway, look at what we're trying to do. What I didn't see in here, and maybe you can help me understand in the curriculum development, is how have you adapted all of these curriculums, because we've been at this for a while now, to meet the mastery-based and the individual personal pace that you've talked about many times, that's in essentially our definitions of, because this is still pretty structured, right? It's used as studies delivered this way. Sequentially, to some degree, there's differentiation. We thank God we moved past and doing all 30 kids the same way, same time. The next step in that progression was we did leveling, right? The next step from that was we kind of went to small group, right? But to move down the continuum all the way to individual, you got to go the next step, and the next step is harder because now it's into individual kids, essentially learning and consuming. And I just didn't see that here in any of the document of where we've actually are developing the curriculum to enable that. Because if the curriculum doesn't enable it, you can't move that, a teacher can't move that next step.
Exactly. Which is why we have within Schoology so many companion resources or supplemental resources. And the playlists are one of those plays in our personal learning playbook that does allow for that pace and choice and voice to honor our definition and our strategic plan. So that's why you see so much more of those, and those are ones that we have created with teachers so that we can provide for consistency of implementation. And I can share those again with you, what we talked about at the end of the year, and share a sample. But that does provide for that choice, and even based on their entry point. So a lot of the playlists are created based on their data. It's created based on that, whether it's passion or certainly performance and their levels. Some of the playlists are actually leveled for the student. Getting more towards a more competency-based or mastery-based approach, that's been part of the strategic plan. And we'll start started that work. I mean, there's more to be done there. And with Dr. Jones, I think as we move through this last year of the strategic plan and moving towards the next iteration, I mean, that's a significant project, which requires much more than just making it happen in the classrooms. How you report that achievement to the families. It's the report card system. It speaks to grading practices. I mean, there's much more work to be done there.
Yeah, but we're, with all due respect, we're 5 years
I
into
understand.
it. So what I think I'm hearing in a nice way is,
We want to make that happen, and our intent
okay,
is to make that
so
happen with Dr.
hope's
Jones.
not a strategy.
I didn't say hope. I said we want.
Okay,
I said our intention is that with Dr. Jones' leadership, we can work towards that.
Because to me, this reads like it's a bolt-on to what I'm already doing. And I'm going to keep going with what I have right now when I do these renewals. And oh, by the way, I will kind of incrementally add in this ability to do personalized. And I think if we're going to commit to personalized learning, you got to flip that over. It's like being half pregnant. There's no such thing, right? You either got to be, you either are or you're not. So I candidly on this, right? No, come on. The point I'm trying to make is we either need to get in the boat and really commit to this and create curriculum that enables it, really? Because the idea that we're going to go to a teacher, or you're going to go to a student and say, oh, by the way, guided by a teacher, pick some stuff out of Schoology in a playlist. Okay, that's not going to be a very effective delivery model for mastery-based, personal-paced, which is, by the way, what we're committed to. I mean, Keaton, you spent a ton of time on this definition, and you were determined to get these things, and we all kind of went along because it was right. But we got to move that out of vision and into execution. And candidly, someone's telling me this is what I'm going to do for the next 6 years, and that did not leap off the page.
The intent of this report was to provide you with an update of the Curriculum Institute and how we're going to manage the curriculum going forward. We do speak to how we make learning personal every day for all of our learners through those academic reports. And I think back to our retreat at the end of the year where we did provide you with a significant amount of work that the teachers have done to understand the learner, create learning experiences based on their personal data, their learner profile, and make that happen. There is a lot of mastery-based work that is happening for the individual student. We don't have a mastery grading system, a competency-based grading system to back that up and to support that.
I got the other things, but this is like the chicken or the egg, right? I realize 5 different things have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But since tonight we're only talking about the curriculum, I'm asking what's happening in that component, not the rest of it, right? We can have another.
I think you're asked.
I don't think
Well, that's always been our promise, is to create an agile and 21st century and beyond curriculum to support the strategic plan.
Just meeting management. We've been at this about an hour, so if we could. No, it is, but the assessment report is also, I think, going to take some time. So with that, Ms. O'Neill and then Ms. Tate.
I just want to reinforce the fact that I think we should be looking for materials that are already ready-made. I think for 2 reasons. One, I don't think you can expect an elementary school teacher to write 4 and 5 lesson plans every night and feel very creative and then try and elaborate on those for personalized learning. And they're also, teachers aren't trained to write curriculum. It's not their area of expertise. So we're asking people not trained to do very important work in a short period of time that impacts an awful lot of students. And I think the other thing we need to look at is the system we're using now, which is costing $500,000 a year, delivering the impact that we want in terms of student achievement? If we're not getting the kind of... No, it's curriculum management in general. If we're spending that kind of money, I think we should be looking for results, and if we're not getting the results that we want, then I think we have to go back and say, well, is this the model that we should be following?
Ms. Deaton.
I think we're confusing a lot of different things tonight, and I worry about the perception the public is going to have. I think we have one curriculum. We have a different way of implementing it for each individual. We have different pace for each individual. We may use different assessments. We may use different digital tools, but there's one curriculum. Irene is presenting the curriculum management plan for the whole district. I understand the point of this. To Barbara's point, I believe that master teachers are perfectly capable of writing curriculum, that should be a benefit to reaching that status in life. And I'd like to encourage there to be a progression in the careers of teachers to reach master teacher and be able to write curriculum. Certainly don't want to constrain that ability. But where we personalize, I think, is in the next topic, which is the assessment system. We can't assess everyone using the same assessment tools because they're not always adaptive enough for different abilities. So I'm ready to move on.
Anybody else on the first two topics, Curriculum Institute, Curriculum Plan Review Cycle? All right, thank you. Obviously,
One thing, I would like to see the goals for the Curriculum Institute presented to the board January, February, so we know what's coming, what the output of that group is going to be, what the cost's going to be, what's the implementation plan, and the data that went into making those decisions.
Wouldn't that also be part of the budget, the cost we get in December?
we'll see it before December, actually, because we'd approve it in December.
Specific plan for that.
And I guess my add-on to that is the concern is Curriculum Institute meets over the summer. According to the document, the Q&A, teachers get that curriculum at convocation. So there's basically not a board meeting between the Curriculum Institute and convocation. And if curriculum has been refreshed beyond whatever the standard that we'll develop is, there's no opportunity for the board to vote on it. You're going live. So just a concern and something to think about the timing there. But thank you. Obviously, we've been on a journey. I do remember when you got here, you found a couple of binders on a couple of shelves. We now have a more complete system, but this is a journey we need to continue on, and maybe the pacing is something we keep talking about. All right, with that, we will move on to the assessment report schedule. So Dr. Ferragamo, if you want to join us. Dr. Jones, if you want to introduce it.
This is the district accountability metric, and the intent, or my understanding of the intent, was not as much to discuss each assessment that we give, but to tell you what we're giving and when we're giving them. Is that correct, Ms. Ferragamo?
The accountability metrics that you have in front of us are what we use for the state, for the NGAIS. And then the teachers in their classrooms, they have their scheduled assessments for curriculum. And then they also have, we do have as well the lost links, which we also use for the NGAIS, state accountability. And then we have PSATs, which is not part of this state accountability, but they are given in October at the high school. And let's see what else is there given, so that these are the things that we use. And then we have the placement assessment calendar that we use for outplacement, October, November, January, and March. When that is given, and I have a copy of that if you would like me to send it to the superintendent, or you can send it to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think I asked.
Oh.
It's something I asked for. I basically wanted to know what of these assessments were used for what placements.
Okay.
Because I know certain of these STAR assessments are used for 6th grade placements. I didn't see COGAT on here. The Q&A says, oh, COGAT's just for ALP students. So this is the high level.
COGAT is used for all 2nd grade students.
Okay, so not listed here.
Right. Well,
Right,
that's
so-
because it was the accountability metrics, and that's what.
So maybe the backup to this is these are the others, and if you have the what's used for placements, right? ALP, sixth grade, or
I'll
anything
send that
else.
to Dr. Jones.
Maybe Andy
It's the calendar of when the assessments are given, so that you know that in September, students might be a little nervous because they're taking STAR, even though we don't want them to be nervous. They have the KEI, which is the kindergarten inventory. They take that in October. That is something that's done statewide. Then we have the winter benchmark, and then we have the spring benchmark, Gosling's, and then SBA and NGSS.
Ms. Dayton?
I'll combine two questions. First, can you explain the rationale for when STAR reports go home? Is it a universal practice across all buildings? Which of the STAR reports are given to parents? And the second thing is, when you list the PSAT suite of assessments in the high school grades, is that every grade?
PSAT is in grade 9 and 10.
Okay, 9 and 10 only. And then the state test.
11.
11, oh, for 11, for the ones that haven't, yeah. that want to-
No.
Yes.
The thing I'm lost here is, that's why I was asking what the purpose of this thing is, because we could really easily right now just drift into a whole conversation about the assessment system, which, by the way, I want to have a conversation about the assessment system from the agenda perspective. That's why I was trying just to keep us, is this information? Are we going to go talk about the calendar? I mean, I don't want to put these people on the spot if it's not, we're not ready to have these. Because Jennifer's asked some great questions.
I think on the topic, as
What,
I
because
was
the
trying
topic
to create these ideas.
says assessment report schedule.
Right, so I'm not sure what accountability means, but to me, I felt like this was supposed to be a report that was gonna tell us, maybe not like what one child is taking because they're sort of this unusual who knows what, but what like a substantial percentage of our students are taking. So that's why I was asking about the middle school placement, the COGAT, what years are they taking the PSAT? What placement at the high schools? When I said A-push, I wasn't talking about the fact that they take the AP exam at the end of the year. I meant that there's a placement exam that needs to occur for A-push. There's a placement exam that occurs for 113A. So, these are exams that a lot of students are taking, and I think we get a lot of pushback in terms of how many tests kids are taking and what's the purpose and is it fruitful. And so to me, I wanted to have that whole layout like we had had in the past that included a lot more of the exams that were going on. So I was just off the top of my head trying to think of things that I expected to see that I wasn't. So I wasn't clear, are they not happening anymore? How is that happening? So I feel like there was a lot more that I wanted in here than what I'm seeing.
So I think I see the utility in this, but I also understand where Peter is because I think I want to be there as well. Really digging into the assessment system. It's been a while since I think we've had that conversation.
Well, and to be fair, Irene, I asked this, you guys are probably not remembering, before we went away for the break, I asked this question because Irene gave us a very, very detailed report. It's now 3 years ago, okay, and it laid out the assessment system in great detail. And we had lots of conversations about what's in there. And I asked Irene the question, I said, Irene, have you deviated from that? Nope, we're still using that. And by the way, that was her answer. And I'm like, I'm all good because I know nothing has changed from what was in place, which probably means it's also working for what is needed. And this schedule, we've been told this many times before. I would be interested in having a conversation if the assessment system itself has changed or there is a recommendation to change it, then I would hope we'd have that as a discrete discussion because this one doesn't help me because I also remember from that, you probably doesn't remember, this accountability, that's the language we've used. We used formative and we used summative.
I think Ann said that this was the stuff that feeds into the state accountability, so that's where that word is there. So are we clear or not on the reason why some tests aren't listed is because they don't feed into the state accountability?
But there's probably some here that don't feed into the state
Right.
either.
Star
There
does
seems
not
to be
feed
a
into the
star.
state.
Right, so that's not that either.
And what,
So STAR is our benchmark
is
system
this
that we
supposed
use.
to be what feeds into the state?
It feeds into the state except The STAR benchmark does not, and ECHR growth does not, but everything else does. But because that was something that we use district-wide as our benchmark assessment, which the state requires us to have, we have to have a benchmarking system. That's why we had it in this particular calendar.
Sorry, does kindergarten go to state?
Yes.
Miss Stone and Miss.
Right, so I think that, I understand, Anne, why you put this together in this format. I think it would be helpful to see all the tests that are given to, 90% of the students, because I am hearing more and more that children are feeling sort of over-tested. And if that is the case, perhaps there's a reason for it, and if it's showing, success, and we're actually having student growth and, better achievement, then I can justify it. But if we're just testing for the sake of testing, then that's no longer good. And so one of the things that I also would want included in here is, yes, you're right, for placements and, ALP and going, all that would be great. But how has this also changed for, well, you've been on the board, so maybe it's changed a lot, but over 5 years. Like, I know STAR wasn't around until 5 years ago, right? So perhaps there's a lot of tests that have been added, taken away. I'd love to know. We added STAR, I know my son didn't take it like 5 years ago. I feel like it just started.
No, it did, once they set it.
Right.
And they gave it to us like 3 years ago, or some number of years ago. You guys laid this out, we're gonna do stars, that'll feed in, that'll create the Epworth score, we're gonna have the SAT, we're not gonna have the caps going away.
Right.
You laid it all out. There was the Fontes and Bonnell and other things for formatives, for formative
And they still do that. They still do that, right?
assessment.
And
It was
it's
pretty
done
comprehensive and well thought out
as a
plan.
diagnostic.
As a diagnostic.
It hasn't really changed, right?
So I know there's so much, like,
Okay,
it is
all right,
still
we're
there.
all over the place.
So that's my point, I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we could have, yes, thank you, more comprehensive and changes.
So for clarity,
Yes.
you want to know what kind of formal assessment, or do you want formative? Because teachers do formative assessments every single day. Unit assessments,
Can I make a great
I
suggestion?
would like to have
Please.
There's a document that they wrote that's on board docs. I'll find it, what date it is.
Right.
If you go read it, it's a great primer in assessments, what they, each one of them are, what they do, why they're there.
And then where we are.
Maybe we could get a read for it.
It's worth doing some
And
homework.
maybe we could do a visual as to what is what.
Side by side would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. And then what worked, what hasn't worked, right?
And unfortunately, I didn't get my answer from you,
I'm sorry.
so I know it's not your fault at all. Someone else interrupted. And since I don't have anything on the next agenda item to refer to, I'm gonna ask again. STAR reports. What STAR reports go to parents and what's the rationale?
In the past, the results were sent to the parents. It's a customized letter that we designed with STAR. We have not had a conversation yet with Dr. Jones as to what she wants us to do this year moving forward. Dr. Jones has been very familiar with STAR, so we wanted to have a conversation about it. So we're still developing that, so
Okay.
we will let you know as soon as we have that conversation.
There's parent perspective and there are a
I
couple
sent a
others.
copy of
Peter
mine.
sent his own. Parent perspective,
Meaningless.
well, it's meaningless because it lacks context. Most parents don't understand what it means, where it puts their child, what the roadmap forward for their child is. It basically comes in a vacuum. It comes in a letter, and you look at it and you say, I don't know what this is. And if it doesn't happen around conference time in elementary school, you probably just put it away.
And the prescription, not that I have any children in the district, but the one that you shared, the prescription of what the parent should work on did not match what the student actually achieved, because I think the one that we saw, this was a really high achieving reader, and it was recommended to do some like daily reading, like it didn't match.
So the STAR test, when it was put in place, the question was, would it really have a high enough ceiling for our able students? And it doesn't. I mean, kids top out of that, and that's why, A, it's not a good test for all our kids, and second, it's not a good identification tool. And thirdly, it's been being used in the school almost like a weekly, quiz. Kids can quote the questions right off the test. They've taken it so often. even though it's supposed to be.
Wait a second.
That's true.
Okay.
But, okay, wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my observation about the STAR test, okay? So it's, the ceiling's not high enough. The other question I have about the STAR test, the STAR test is used to identify students to summer school?
We use a combination of STAR and ECRA, and we use the low performing, low benchmark.
So which STAR test do you use? The one
The January one.
the January?
And the ECRAs, and are they making sure that they're making?
Okay, so I was told by a parent, maybe this is inaccurate, that the invitations for kids going to summer school comes out too late for those parents who are trying to get their kids into another program, summer program. They don't know if their kids are being invited to summer school because the invitations come out so late. Something to think about in terms of the parents. Because I was told, they're probably wrong now, but anyway, that's something to think about in terms of parent communication, and to look at the usability of the STAR test for all kids, for all purposes.
I understand. I'm puzzled by two things you said, and I'd love to, and since we're on, this is a discussion of the calendar, I'll stick to the calendar. I understood that STAR was being administered 3 times a year. Hold on. Well, wait. If I go back and look in that document, that's what it's going to say, Irene. It's going to say it was administered 3 times a year. The purpose of it also was to roll that up, plus other data that we have. ECRIS was beautiful in the fact that it kept a rolling growth number, not a snapshot in time, which is all STAR does. And as a result, to your point, in terms of scheduling for summer school, don't look at a snapshot in time. Look at that kid's rolling growth, because they're either improving or they're not. They're meeting their growth or they're not. That was the way this whole thing was presented. Is that right? That that's not how STAR's being used? Is that true?
Can I speak to that now? Yeah. So I first used this platform back in 1996, so it's a platform that I know really well. Every district I've worked with.
Yeah, lots of people used it.
So there are always a lot of challenges. Parent reports have been terrible in this platform since the day they were introduced. Most districts don't use the actual, even though you try to tweak them, they still are confusing. Generally, for elementary, at parent conference time is when you should really be talking about that, when you can explain it to parents and actually, have that good discussion. I can say from the conversations that I've had, and certainly Ms. Parisi may want to jump in, I don't believe that we have all of our teachers in schools across the district assessing children all the time. I do think we have maybe some buildings, some pockets where perhaps a teacher is concerned that their children are not growing at the rate and they are using it to kind of constantly assess as progress monitor. And we'll continue to look at that. I don't know where those pockets are. Ms. Parisi probably does. And we need to work on that, because we shouldn't be doing that where we're over utilizing an assessment, but it is a screener for us. And so, teachers do take it very seriously in that it does let you know if a child perhaps is not performing where they need to perform.
But Tony, to your point, let me just clarify this point. To your point, we knew when Bill McCursey and Irene brought this forward that in a lot of places in the country, STAR is used as an annual summative. Okay? We were told that very clearly, right? And the proposal was to bring in STAR to use it differently here, and we wound up with this 3 times, like I believe it was in the state of California for a while. State of California was using it as their test. So they were using Renaissance STAR as their test, but just like New York Regents or whatever it is. So the point was, to your point, was I understood here we decided to use it as a screener, and that was its purpose. And it was used to have teachers figure out at regular intervals what was happening. And to Kathleen's point, it was also to bring some structure and so that we weren't over testing. We were doing it at the intervals that made sense for the educators so that they could figure out whether the progress was happening or not. And they weren't over testing, and everybody wasn't using a different tool to figure that out because it led to over testing. So if that's not the right strategy going forward, I would hope we would hear that soon, but that was the way it was originally presented. It would only be implemented 3 times a year. It would help teachers understand at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and towards the end of the year, what was happening. Almost more as a formative, it was a formative assessment tool in the way it was presented. It wasn't presented as a summative assessment tool.
The add-on to that is that it was supposed to give us an indication of how kids would do on the CNT.
That too.
Yeah.
On the summit.
So
Dr. Jones,
it-
and then we'll go to Ms. Daly.
Yeah, I might just add, for, again, as long as the platform's been out there, it's been an assessment that in general was, and it may not be the way it was rolled out here, it is an assessment that would be given several times during the school year. And that's been pretty much the norm. And if you look at the Response to Intervention RTI national website where they list all the assessments, it has one of the highest rating, it is the highest rated assessment. And part of that is because it can be that screener, you can use it for progress monitoring, but you also don't want to overdo it. And the great thing about the assessment is that there are 2 reasons why a lot of districts like it. Number one, it's fairly quick. You know, it's usually about a 15-minute assessment. So if you take that assessment 3 times during the year, sounds like a lot, but you add up 15, 15, 15 in a course of 180 some odd days, it's really not that much. The second aspect is there's a humanistic aspect to teaching. And I was a reading specialist, and so I know how hard it is when you're giving an assessment where you're the one that's marking the cues for a child. And sometimes you can get teachers that will, I'm going to say, help a little too much when they're assessing individually or count something right that maybe it was kind of in the middle, probably should have been marked incorrect. And STAR gives you another marker that takes that humanistic aspect away because it is automated. And that's a piece that I think that's another reason why it is the highest rated assessment for RTI.
Given our strategic plan centered on personalized learning with a major component, family and community engagement, if the STAR is not communicating to families how they can support their learners, we need to get rid of it. I don't care if it's a wonderful 15-minute assessment. I don't care if it's easily used in the classroom. The point of our strategic plan is to engage families as much as possible in supporting the accelerated learning of their students. I'd like you to look into the SBA suite of assessments, which I believe are adaptive, which are very, very good, which are aligned, and bring us other options. The SBA has a suite of their own assessments. Yeah.
Dr.
Can I
Francis.
jump in?
Oh, you mind? Yeah, Ms. Olson, then Dr. Francis.
So, yeah, first of all, I think that there's definitely an issue of consistency. I hear mostly from the elementary level, but I know that. Do you hear me or sound like Charlie Brown?
We can hear you.
Okay, I have a lot of feedback, just want to make sure you can hear me. I think that there's a lot of inconsistency in the elementary school level. Some maybe more high stress you might say elementary schools. Parents are asking for more and more tests. The stress around placement exams, mainly, I guess ALS was the only placement exam at that point. I know that before my time 3 years ago, I guess, as Peter Scher mentioned, you must have looked closely at the assessments. I think that I tend to disagree that it's just been working, like, let's keep it as is, because I really think that that's something that needs to also be evaluated. Not I know it's just to look at time being given, which is an issue, but also I think we need to look at those actual assessments, particularly for placement assessments. I think they're inconsistent and need to be looked at as well.
Thank you. Dr. Francis.
So one thing I was going to say, just in response to Jennifer's comments about the STAR and the reporting, and I don't have a particular opinion on STAR or not, but if STAR is really felt to be the best test, then maybe we just figure out some way to supplement the report to make it more understandable to parents, so that we maybe just need to work on that report. The other thing that I'm hoping for, and this is a little, out there, but conversation I had when we first, actually it was on the PTA at the time, and when I think it was John Gatto came and spoke to us about this, and I said, we make this distinction between formative and summative and screening and all these things, but when we get to the point where we've got really good digital tools for our math, for example, those tools will actually tell you where the kid is and what they have already, what they've already mastered, at which point you don't need to test them because that information is coming back to you automatically. And even, I think we're using Dreambox now, and I forget what the other one is in the elementary school, SUNAP, and they will give you a report and you can cut and slice it just the way we got from ECRIS, what are all my third graders doing, or what are all my kids in this one class doing. And so in a lot of ways I start to wonder if we need to continue to do this as we move towards mastery-based, if we've got tools, for example, in the math area that might obviate the need, because as they're doing their work, as they're showing their ability to master a subject, then they're going to get marked off as mastered and they don't need to take a test on it.
Yeah, but we also needed to be able to, not just that, then you need to be able to roll it up and have consistency. So you have that need is at the student level, but you need the other problem, which is how do I make sure I can see all 9,000 students and what's happening?
But, at least with Dreambox and what I've looked at on their website, there are all kinds of ways to dice and slice that data. So you can see it all across all third graders. You can see it all.
Beneath that thing, deeper down in STAR, which is not something a parent ever sees or we would ever see, because we're looking at batches of kids. It's got to be this way. An individual STAR, it's got to be break it down at strand level or standards or something, and it can then tell the teacher quite precisely exactly where that kid landed. I can't imagine it just comes out and says, oh, because I put you a kid in 4th grade, you're all at 100 and there's no information available to the teacher. That would be really surprising to me that they would have an assessment like that. That was why when you were saying top out, I was like, I'd love to know more about that.
Well, the kids do. The kids know the test, and it's not challenging enough to find out how much they really do know.
It's adaptive, but only to a point.
Because some children are beyond 12th grade.
And it's been normed across, if I'm not mistaken.
America.
Yeah. So we're not the typical town. So we need to be, for better or worse, we need to be looking for some of our kids a test that tells us where they are. And to use the STAR as identification is not.
And to end that on that point, because I think we wanted, that was the whole point of why we needed our own growth model that was beyond, because telling me I'm in the 98th percentile versus Alabama doesn't help. So.
Oh my God, that's a cool paper job.
I think I'm going to turn in. All right, Dr. Francis.
I would request, and we can decide on I get a consensus on this or not, which is that I would like to see it all on one page. I don't really want it in 2 pages. It was the request was a supplemental.
Well, the supplemental can be an annex. Basically, if they could update the document that Peter's referenced. Right, they've got this screen.
And more like the flow, what is used for what.
Yeah.
Not what this.
Right, because at the end of the day, if that's updated and people don't feel the need for another session on an assessment system, right? If people get comfort. So the idea is it's information requested. There you go.
Yeah, I can think.
All right. So thank you very much, Dr. Carabillo. But don't go anywhere because I see your name here on the next item, which is the student profile for ECRIS, and we'll start with Dr. Jones. And Ms. Lau, if you want to join us.
So first of all, with ECRIS, I think one of the commitments that I made coming in was to really study it through the summer. And I've spent a lot of time with Ms. Lau. She's been very, very generous with her time. So we've really gone in and looked at the system. She's kind of shown me how we utilize the system. We have surveyed our administrators to find out how useful do they find the system. Is it giving us something that is really, we feel like, making a difference for student achievement? now I'm gonna say this quietly because I don't think you're gonna like what I'm gonna say. Overwhelmingly, in the district, I think we're not finding that it's a tool that's really helping us. And part of that for numerous reasons. And it really comes down to, does the board want to invest that $100,000 to have a growth number? But the challenges with that is that at the end of the year, we get the reports on growth, pretty much we're all green. And it almost, we celebrate the aspect that you're in the green, even though we have a lot of areas we really need to be in the blue. So we are making the expected growth overwhelmingly in the district because we have amazing teachers. But where we're really wanting to fine tune are those areas where we need 1.5 years, or 2 years growth, but it's 1.5 years. And it's not, the data comes a little bit late also for our administrators and teachers. They pretty much get a printout sheet. What we really feel like we are missing is real-time data that a teacher can sit there at the screen and look at. Now, we've had a lot of conversations with ECRIS over the past, well, even just last week, and we've asked them about what their capacity is. They can build things for us, and if we want to ask them to build, if enough people that are in their platform agree that it would be user-friendly, then they might do that at no cost. If it's something we want to build unique, then it's above and beyond that 100,000. I would just say 100. I know it's, yeah. And it's not that it gives us a growth number. I mean, it does give us that, but do we feel like it's impacting our teaching and learning and helping teachers at the classroom level understanding if their kids are growing? And I think even ECRIS said when we were on a phone call with them, it's more about a kind of a district tool. Are we growing at all of our buildings? So, but for the amount of money that we're spending, I'm not hearing overwhelmingly that it's the tool that we're wanting to need. Now, part of that also is if you reflect back where we were when we started the strategic plan, nobody really had a growth number. So now we're kind of in that challenge where we have an ECRIS growth, but we also have state growth, which is going to be, it's really important. That's where we want to put a lot of our effort. And we also have STAR growth, which we just kind of talked about. So you've got these different models that are all kind of working together, but we really want to be able to look at what the state is doing, and it is brand new. We didn't have this capacity 5 years ago. So I think that, the discussion, at least from our perspective, will be, is the board going to be open for us to issue an RFP this year to just do another deep dive and a look before we start like the next strategic plan about what is out there, what is available, and are there other tools that actually are going to open up some of that dashboard component too that we think we can be more effective at.
Ms. Raven.
I think I have lots of questions. So the fact that, so it comes back to me for training. So does everybody know how to use the system? Because I recall, but it's a long time ago, getting demos where you could get real-time dashboards. And it wasn't just a district drill down, you could drill down to the student, the classroom, etc. I would be hesitant to go out with an RFP to look for something different because I'm not convinced. I don't know, you've talked to the teachers and the administrators, are we using it to its ability? Have we trained the staff? Because when we saw it at a retreat, maybe that was like a year ago, year and a half ago, there was some amazing information in there that I don't think we've ever seen again. And there was that whole, the student profile. Like we had this concept of what a student profile will look like. I don't think I've ever seen that.
It never got rolled out.
So I don't know why we would look for something else unless we're 100% sure that we're using what we have to its ability.
Right. That's one of the questions that, that I asked, early on also. So what kind of professional development have we done? What did we do when we first rolled it out? Generally when you do your rollout in the first year, you're paying a lot of money for that professional development. At the end of the year, we should feel like it was pretty user-friendly. I'm not sure that everybody felt that way. And the next year when we brought the training back and we paid for that, for our administrative retreat, I believe is where it happened. The feedback was not great about the training because they didn't feel like they were going to that next level with their learning in the platform. And again, I have no bias in this. I had not really heard of ECRIS before I came here. The other thing I think about the platform is that because it's so heavily utilized in Illinois, they have data points in Illinois, just like we would have if they would build it, for everybody here in Connecticut off of our new reporting system, it would be able to pull in those pieces. But that student profile, you're looking at like a sandbox. You're looking at the demonstration for other districts to buy and sell, so you could kind of put anything in there. And that's one of the questions that we have been asking them is, what data can we pull in? What other platforms does it talk to? How is it, and more than anything, how is it measuring our growth? And, I probably had been looking at it for 6 weeks before I realized that, like, if we get a student at the beginning of the year that's new, well, at the end of the year, they're not in that growth report for the school. Where, because they have to go year to year. Well, some of our children that we're most concerned about are not showing up in those reports at the end of the year. And that's a challenge because that's really important, especially in some of our buildings that have higher mobility.
Ms. Tatum.
I have a question. Has the ECRIS system been itself evolving? Has it become more sophisticated or has it stayed static? In other words, instead of doing an RFP, are there new features, are there new capabilities within the system that we haven't tapped yet? And secondly, I think we all recognize we need a system that provides the capability to have a composite of assessments rolled up into the growth measure. Lauren's right, we did have individual student pages, there's no question about it. I'm worried about switching because once you've trained your faculty, you don't want to roll out something new. Is there a middle ground between a new RFP and what data sold to us years ago? Can they come in and do some work for us?
We've had a lot of conversations and I think from some of the questions that we've asked, it gets all the way down to that user level where we want a teacher to be able to bring up their class, look at their history, look at the longitudinal data. And when we asked that question, the response that we got, and I was on a phone call with Mr. Gata as well, was that, oh, you want to do that? It doesn't do that. The platform doesn't do that. And so one of the...
We need a discussion and a demo.
Yeah.
We need a discussion and a demo from this.
So Ms. Stowe to Mr. Sheridan.
Look, I don't want to throw good money after bad money, but just, the sunk cost theory. How much have we spent on this? Just because I think it would be good to know.
We spend $90,000 a year.
A year, and how many years have we had this?
5.
Okay, so a lot, but if it's not right,
And
then I care about what the administration and the teachers say. If it's not working, I obviously want to hear more about that. But you're right, I think we need to have, but I'm not as invested in this either because I wasn't part of the original. But.
So Tony, what do you want to replace it with?
I don't think that we know what we want to replace it with other than we want a system that is going to allow us to log in, bring up a student, look at their history from multiple different assessments. We would like a dashboard that's going to be easy for us to pull in data, that's also going to be much faster turnaround than what we get from ECRIS. I think, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, it's sometimes like 3 weeks just for us to get information back, and so the teachers sometimes...
Between start deployment and actually turning out a growth, or not a growth.
If you don't mind coming forward.
So I get that part of the requirements. So my question would be, you must have thought about another product to replace it. What would that be?
There's a product right now that we know is on the market.
What's it called?
It's yeah.
No, I'm interested for the RFP. I'm interested in what are the products that are in the market that you guys have looked at that you think might potentially
What
meet
I
the
can
need.
do is we can send you a list of some that are out there.
Jen, what's the one you've looked at already?
I've actually looked at several over the last year.
Okay, can you give me some names?
Actually, not.
Why not?
Who's to stop ECRIS
were coming back in there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I mean, this is kind of a.
Defer to the superintendent.
Tony, I mean, it's not an Easter egg hunt, right? I mean, if you guys have a tool in mind, what is it?
There are platforms out there, but I think what we would need to do, honestly, that's why an RFP would be great.
Okay, great.
Because there could be a platform out
Can you
there I
do
don't
this?
even know
Could
exists.
you, if you don't want to say it here on tape or whatever, tonight before you leave, just send us an email with a list of some of these companies, and then it'll be within the board. That'd be great. So my question was, what's that?
Maybe not tonight.
Okay, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, but, you know. See, the thing that's bothering me about this conversation, and unfortunately I'm sitting here, I know way more about IT than I think anybody here, is there's a whole bunch of functionality that's in ECRIS. I don't know why. It's not easy to replace these tools. Jennifer, you asked the right question. Okay. And the other problem in education technology is all the stuff is in the dark ages. So as an example, getting an EDI, a direct electronic feed from Renaissance, okay, to get STAR loaded, you can't really get that way. So as a result, everybody has to hand load data. This is why it takes time, which is a problem in systems in general. The problem in systems in general. But the point of it is that tools aren't tools. You have to commit to a model. Right? So tools make the model happen. And what we did as a district is we committed to a particular, very well thought out growth model that fit to this assessment system. And what's troubling me is all these years is, I've actually talked to teachers too. And I've talked to administrators in buildings. And I've asked them, how do you use this thing? And I found out as an example, when we're talking about people aren't using this thing, we have tens of thousands of page views on ECRIS from teachers. The learner profiles, they're actually done in our system. They were never rolled out to parents, as an example. And there was a commitment to do that. That was never done. We can't even see it. You go in and, by the way, you may go in, you may notice this, you go in and log into ECRIS right now, as with your login. None of us have probably done it. Because remember, there's the part that's the board part in there.
Right.
It's actually, everything's been removed. All the applications that are available from ECRIS, our screens are blank right now. Okay? I don't know who turned that off, but somebody turned that off. So the point of it is that if ECRIS is the wrong tool, let's get rid of it. But I think, I would hope, I would not be willing, because it's a question of throwing out some things that we have made. So as an example, there's been an argument to go to the state's, use the state's growth system instead. Well, guess what? It only goes grades 4 through 8 or 4 through 9. It doesn't cover all of our grades. So you can't use the state systems in the same way. The other thing is it's like STAR. They're not a local growth model, which is helpful. They're comparing everything else in the state of Connecticut. So you wouldn't use that for generalized district-to-district accountability. You wouldn't use it for this. So the point I'm trying to make is I would want to hear a lot more about very specific requirements. I would want to hear very specifically what's working and what's not working. And then to Jennifer's point, I would want to look at a much more vigorous, how do you make the thing we have? Because now that thing's got 5 years of data in it. Do you have no idea what's involved in building a data warehouse that has 5 years of data? Now, I get the one of the student who just came in, but that's probably a real problem. But to solve that problem, I would be unwilling to toss out the stuff for the other 90% of the kids who've been in the district, because we have kids who are in the district a long, long time. So I would want to, if you ask for feedback about this, I'd want to know a lot more. I'd want to know what this one could do for us, what it's very specifically not doing. I would want to see, I mean, you must have a list of requirements. Can you send us a list of requirements already? You must have it
We
written
actually
down.
have a list of questions that we ask Equus
Do you have
because.
requirements though of what you think we need?
Yes, we asked, and that's why we asked them specific questions about can you do X, Y, Z that we're hearing from our teachers. And again, I mean, my reporting tonight is just to share what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing and being honest about it.
Well, we're gonna
And,
have to make a budget decision shortly.
Right.
So we need to know.
yeah, we have that list.
It seems to me the other thing is the board probably needs a full update on what the because John's been in here with us a couple times. And I think he had a lot of respect in the board on his knowledge about this too.
Yeah.
So, but if his product can't do it, but it seems to me we should get direct updates so we know, because the other thing that's in there that we're missing is, to your point, remember, top level indicators, it's the board dashboard. So any system we would need a board dashboard. And then also it turns out, I think, in the system, all those operational metrics that we were always looking for, what you called the one level down, those are in there too. They just never been published.
Interesting.
Did you have something?
Okay.
Okay,
I can wait for
Francis.
So I completely agree that giving up data is hard, but I have otherwise no particular opinion one way or the other. I want the right tool. I would say two things that are important to me, and ones that I brought up again when I was in the PTA, is turnaround time. I mean, again, now in the digital age, kids should be getting feedback same day, next day, right? I mean, you're trying to act on this in terms of using it as a tool to teach your kids. 2 or 3 weeks is really slow. So I think that's a huge point that we have to look at and that we have to really push on is why is digital information taking so long to turn around? So I think that's a huge fix that needs to happen. The other concern I have is that I completely agree that we want a model that works for us in terms of the growth. But one of the concerns I had from the beginning, and I think we've gone back and forth on this a bit, is that our growth model is based on what kids did 5 years ago. So, we looked at and said, okay, if you're growing 84% of what you would expect a kid to have done at that time, and you're doing at least that well, then you're green. But the problem is that we weren't budging the needle then. And so if we just stay at green, we're still not going to budge the needle. And so the question was, how do you ramp that up to say our expectations are greater? And so we tried to say a higher percent, and then people were arguing that mathematically what we were doing didn't make sense. But the problem is we built a model that says if 84% of kids do exactly what we used to do, which wasn't budging the needle, then we're okay. And so I think we really need to look long and hard at that model, because we need to do better than that if we're going to try and really improve our scores.
That's not the software, that's the
They're
model.
still the blue. You just characterize it differently.
Right, so we just have to figure out what we need to do if we're going to keep this model to make sure that we're actually progressing.
Right.
And then just program the software accordingly.
Right.
And that's the key point. I think, everybody wants to talk about tools. It's not the tools. You got to start with, what am I trying to get done? What's the model? And then does the tool support the model? Otherwise, it degenerates into a conversation that will say, oh, well, it doesn't have a built-in help or some ridiculous kind of, which is a sideshow to the main event. Right? The real question is can we give teachers and administrators at the point of delivery the information that they need? No offense to everybody in this building, no offense to the board. I'm over-rotated on those people and what they need. I'm also over-rotated on where you are, which is if a parent doesn't get information and they know what to do, how to help. I was shocked to find we never rolled out the learner profile. We were told numerous times it was going to be rolled out. It's never been rolled out to parents. It's like, I'm not going to go beat up on a system that is half executed. That's ridiculous.
So I'm not wedded to any system in particular. I think hopefully John's going to be receptive to the feedback, and the questions will prompt him to come to Web 2.0, which would be more advanced than where he is, but not advanced enough. Data can be migrated. I'd say you've got to explore all possibilities. Obviously, the easiest and best one is getting their system to work the way we want it to work, that it aids our teachers and administrators. Failing that, see what else is out there. Any other discussion on the topic? All right, moving on. Program snapshots, Dr. Jones.
Find that sheet here. Is that? I found it. Thank you. You're welcome. We actually shared this with the finance committee, so we were able to get some feedback, which was very helpful. To date, we have there's around 30 of these that have been completed for the curriculum. When you look at the first page, which has really the grid on it, you're looking at kind of the 4 quadrants, and it lets you know kind of what the programs are where we spend, obviously, where the programs are where you spend the most dollars, that's that top right. And you know, what you'll notice about it, and I don't think it's surprising, is that we're a people-driven business. So those areas where you have, you know, a lot of staff, obviously, you're gonna see a higher expense. When you look at the page behind that, you can see a breakdown of lots of the different programs, what the FTE is. You're looking at what the total program cost is, and then what it costs per student, and how many are actually served within that program. And I would say probably one of the biggest pieces going into the budget is just looking at, you know, how much staff we have in a certain department or a certain area. Are we mobilizing everything and every position as effective as we could? And when you turn to the actual science one, this is where it starts. And I think we were trying to give you one you hadn't seen before because you saw a different content area. We're looking obviously at who's the target group, what is the purpose, trying to tie them back to the tiles, the strategic plan. Looking at what some of those targets are, and then down the bottom we're trying to give you those academic results. Are we being successful with what we're doing and the staff that we have and how we're spending resources? And then when you flip it over on the back side, it's giving you, again, the student numbers and the financial information, which is really by the primary functions of the department. And this becomes, and we talked a little bit about this at the finance committee, was looking at, you know, materials and supplies. If you divide that number by the number of students who have science, how much are we really spending on each child? If you look at professional development for all of our science teachers, how much are we really spending per teacher? And is that enough? And it's a very good analysis tool as we're heading into the budget to have 30 of these completed. And the staff, I will say, a lot of the senior staff, I know Jen Lau spent hours on it this summer as well, but they've really contributed and they all did a lot of work to get these numbers and pull them together.
Thank you.
So before we go into questions, so I was actually looking at the chart, it's the third page, I guess, the program inventory dashboard. Under school administration, teaching and learning, I presume that's principals and otherwise. It's good. 89 head count?
Yes.
Okay. So it says the population served is 16. I think that number is underreported because you're obviously it's serving the
Yes.
right. It's 16 schools, but it actually skews the number. It makes it look like they don't have any impact on students, which I don't think is what you're trying to represent.
We had that.
Yeah.
We had that feedback when we talked about it in committee, and then the last column, Jen, I think we talked about, it's not cost per student, it's cost per school, because like if you look at libraries,
Yeah,
we're not
that's
spending
right.
300,000, 300.
Right, so I think there's a couple that are going to be the outlier because they serve the entire school population. So maybe there's a better way to present those, I don't know, bottom of the chart or a footnote or something. And Ms. Dayton.
I just want to say, and I said this in budget committee, that it's an incredibly useful tool, and I can't believe it's taken us this long to come up with something that's so easy to see at a glance where we are in our allocation of resources. So I am so excited that we have this. And I also hope that people will read it with a grain of salt. For example, if you look at the Windrose program, of course, it looks like, what are those people doing, spending all that money? But as we know, for that particular program, we have a lease. So there are many components that aren't transparent if you just look at the dollars. And I know everyone on the board will take that into consideration when they look at the programs.
Mr.
Mr. President, can I jump in?
Oh, yep, go ahead, Ms. Olson.
Okay, okay. Well, I just want to jump in and say, yeah, I'm so impressed because you were asking for a, program snapshot, or program, what do you call it, program review, and this is, it's a work in progress, but it's concise and it's a great starting point. So thank you for laying it out like this. Thank you guys, Dr. Jones and Ms. Gemma and everyone who worked on it. It's really helpful. And there's going to be some kinks in it. One little typo I was just seeing too, I was looking at the red, I was looking earlier at the red, rectangle, it was the first slide, and I could look at different between you guys. And just also 3, you need K next to that. You may already know what that one. Right? You guys see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
Sorry, if you could clarify for me, obviously for the K-5 teachers, I get that you're serving 4,000 kids. But then so the language, arts, science, mathematics, social studies, K through 12, 8,928. But wouldn't that be 6 through 12? Because you already captured the elementary population in the K through 5? Because you don't have specialty math and science and language arts within the elementary schools. I mean, except for ELF, but that you've put.
That's why you need to go underneath, get the description of what's in the program and then the budget.
Well, but so if you could just answer that, 1 second, Jen, or maybe for a second. So for language arts,
Right.
are we serving 8,928 or is it like 4,000?
The way you're right in terms of the people, but the materials, the supplies, all of the curricular work covers K-12.
Okay.
It's not broken.
So if I
Yeah.
add up the
Okay.
FTE positions, it's not gonna add to our head count, it's gonna be skewed in some way.
No, it will.
Yeah, you would have to look at the underlying snapshots, give you the detail on that. This is clearly just a very.
This is high level.
Right, very high level, and you
Remember what she told us in
do
finance?
need to.
Yeah, no, but, all right. Okay, and I can ask one more?
Yeah.
It's not even a question, it's more of a comment. So, for example, in last year's budget, I remember there was lots of question about cutting intramural sports. And when you see it in this way, boy, do you feel ridiculous. So I think that this is where it's really helpful. So, thank you.
Ms. O'Neill.
I just have a question about how does a program like the academic coaches fit in this? And I was trying to think if there are any other programs like that that kind of overlay everything. So, because that's a program that we should be evaluating along with all our other programs.
Or you mean like CSS or CST, those things?
No.
Barbara, I think they told us in finance the other day that these programs are based on budget codes, right? So you have to ask the question, if you're looking for like how we think of a program, in which of these programs is it? So as an example, you asked about academic coaches. I think academic coaches is in your program.
Yeah, you would see them in the SIPL.
In the SIPL.
In the SIPL staff.
So
Explicitly broken them out.
if we need like a key, you won't remember this, the old budget books that Ben Braining did, this used to be in there. And it had a description that went with each one of what it was. And I think, Jen, you made a description, didn't you?
Well, I guess.
Its purpose, right? Target group, purpose, strategy. Maybe we need to add to that, because when you brought that in the other day. But it
When
need.
you go to the second page of it, Peter, with the 3 boxes,
Yeah.
so the benefited staffing, financial information, usually the breakout of what's
Right.
in that.
That's what I'm saying. To answer Barbara's question and to answer your question, it tells you discreetly what's counted where, and some is,
Right.
when you get to the places delivered at the ground, it's a piece from here, a piece from there, a piece from there.
Yeah.
That's
I also think that, I forget sort of where I got the sense, but that, you know, as we complete this phase, I think there's the option to dig down and to use this similar tool, but with different subsets. So you could say, well, we'd like to use this same concept, but break it down and look at, you know, coaches as a separate group and sort of see what we think the outcome is. And one of the things we had talked about before, whether it's ECRIS or something else, was then also saying, well, is there a way for some of these things for us to look and see, well, what do we think the impact is in terms of outcomes as well? So I think this is sort of the first round of gathering this information, and then the question is kind of where are we going to go next in terms of some of these tools, or what other data do we want to add into it to use it in different ways in terms of evaluating.
Discussion? Ms. Reagan.
A question, because I thought you were going with like CSS and I don't know all the acronyms of the support systems at the high school. So where is guidance counselors, where is that under? Unless I'm just not seeing.
The initial push was for the instructional services. I know Dr. Jones is planning a review of PPS, and that is part of PPS, so those are excluded.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Yes or no?
I just want to back up what Dr. Francis said, that I think if we don't use this to evaluate outcomes, then it's only doing half the job that it was meant to be. To me, the goal was always to see, are we putting our money in the right places? Are we getting the right outcomes? And if we're not, why not? And what do we need to adjust? I think the outcomes is really the important part that we need to be looking at.
But this thing's like a first draft, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is just, you know, they kind of did the work and just said, okay, for these, just go collect all the information, right? But there's gonna be a lot more than this, right?
I guess that begs the question, so how will we see the next iteration? Is this something you're gonna keep us updated on? Because I can only presume, given we've now promised it to the BET and RTM for the past 2 years, that we're gonna get asked for it in some fashion.
Well, but Peter, to that point, I think I think what came out of the finance committee the other day is, I had a particular recollection of why we started this, why Jill Gilday recommended it, how it got started, what its purpose was, and what have you. In the meeting, we had the 4 of us in there. Kathleen wasn't necessarily around, so she couldn't help too much. But the others...
You were there?
No. She was in the meeting, but she doesn't know the history. She doesn't know the history, so you can't put her on the spot and say, Kathleen, why are we doing this? It's like, I don't know, you guys cooked this up before I showed up. Right. So, but the thing that was clear to me coming out of that is we need to go back to what Barbara was saying, and we need to say, why are we doing this? And what are we gonna do with it? And what's gonna be that process? And is it gonna lead to a review? Is it just publishing information? Are there gonna be deep dives? I think I came out of that meeting and I was like, okay, we're not all on the same page about what this is and why we're doing it. And to your point, we've been doing it now for 2 years, and there was the schedule that they flow chart, waterfall that got presented to us, I think 2 years ago. I think we gotta give these folks better guidance about, and I don't know how, about the program reviews and what they are and what we expect to get out of them, because otherwise they're gonna be bumping around in the dark.
Well, I think it's a tool for the Board of Education to exercise its statutory right to allocate resources in the budget based on results. I don't think it's a tool for the RTM and the BET to allocate our resources. That is why I don't think we're all on the same page. This is a tool for the Board of Education, in my view.
I don't disagree with that, Jennifer. I think it serves multiple purposes because it actually shows somebody what the goals are for the program and whether we're actually meeting those goals. And to some in town that may have a budgetary point, to us we may say we want to double down because that's working and go forth and do more.
And I think in the absence of not having it, and I agree, it's for the board, you know, people make some assumptions. So because it's not there, then people think, well, why are you doing this? And maybe you shouldn't be.
We can figure out what we want.
I think it's very dangerous.
any other discussion on this item? If no? No, okay. Ms. Olson, anything else on this item?
No.
All right, if not, we're gonna move on to our next agenda, which is the only action item, which is our agenda plan. I'm gonna recognize Dr. Francis.
So I move that we add October 6th, 1 PM as a board retreat.
Where are you?
Agenda plan.
No, and location. I thought we said it was October 5.
No.
That was the emails that
Maybe.
That's on
Yes, but the whole point was that I've been sending many emails around because October 5th didn't work, so then we tried the weekend of the 12th, which didn't work, so then we came back to the 6th, and there was a majority response that the 6th at 1 o'clock worked, and then there was a bunch of emails that went around about location, and last I had heard, we were thinking library, which, as I said, we may not be able to do a full cater. I have to kind of explore a little bit more, but I think we're probably fine with that. Eat lunch before, or, get a little bit of, snacks or things.
Yeah, let's see before we come.
Is this still the agenda?
It's the same purpose, it's just that the 5th didn't work.
This is the agenda.
I can't see.
Saturday, October.
Yes.
Okay. And, okay.
Okay?
So basically, your motion is to move from October 5th, which was scheduled, to October 6th. We're outside of the 30 days, so it'll be a regularly scheduled meeting. Is that right, Michael?
As long as I can get it in tomorrow.
He's gonna get it in tomorrow. That's what he said. I heard him. Is that what you all heard? It's on videotape. He said it.
It's already drafted.
Can we take this motion discreetly or together?
Well, I think, in fact, do you even have the 5th as an official? Because my sense is the 5th got dropped out because we didn't have a location and a time. So that's why I just made the motion to add the 6th, but make sure I'm doing it correctly.
At the June 13th meeting, it was approved as 10/5, and it was agreed that you were gonna come back and figure out a different date, but you approved it as 10/5 with the TBD.
So why don't you withdraw your motion?
Withdraw my motion. I move to amend the agenda plan to change the October 5th retreat to October 6th, 1 PM at the library.
Second.
Discussion? Hang on. Just any discussion
On that motion?
on that motion? All right, so all those in favor? Ms. Olson? All right, passes 8-0. So we are now on October 6th. Ms. O'Neill?
I'd like to add to the agenda the topic of the Alp Science program.
Discussion on that? All right, so just, I'll say, you don't have a date certain, so we'll work with the superintendent to get that onto a upcoming meeting. All right, so any further discussion? All those in favor of adding Alp Science, the date to be determined? Ms. Olson? Aye, passes 8-0. All right, so that's added to our agenda plan. Mr. Scherer?
Maybe this is updated, Mike. Thursday, December 11th. This was a document from unless Microsoft doesn't know how to work software. It's appearing on my calendar as Wednesday, the 11th, or Thursday, the 12th. Which one's it supposed to be?
I believe that is Wednesday, the 11th.
Okay.
It shows on the agenda plan.
There is a reason.
It's showing Thursday, December 11th, isn't it? Thursday, the 11th is not a Thursday.
The 11th is Wednesday.
So which day is it? Is it
I
Wednesday or
believe it's
Thursday?
the Wednesday. I believe it's the Wednesday because
Some reason, okay.
of evening teacher conferences,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, could someone just,
But it'll be amended.
fine, okay, and my other one was, here, I'm just gonna suggest we put on the calendar put on as an item to be scheduled. The board getting advice on BOE's responsibility for curriculum.
I don't know that we need to add it as an agenda. I've got it noted, and I'll
But that's what I'm saying, is just if you could put
Well,
on, so
we'll
whenever
get-
you're
we'll get
ready,
a
it
written
gets
doc-
scheduled.
We'll get a written document shared with the board first, and we can decide whether we need a discussion.
And if we do, one of the places we could potentially do it is, I think we're still looking for topics to do for our professional development. So that would be potentially an option if we wanted to do something.
The December, the mysterious December date meeting. I think that's our PD.
No, you're talking about board PD on,
Let me start the process of, let me start the process of running through, because, we have to go through the town board before we can go to real education. All right, anything else for the agenda plan? All right, hearing none, Dr. Fresh, you got a motion on Mike?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All right, all those in favor of adjourning? Ms. Olson? Ms. Olson would like to adjourn. We are all adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, Megan.
So, Karen, what's your schedule like? Is it mostly open? Yeah.